We've given a lot of our time to how we start the Five Gates program, and especially about how we get rid of the early life misdirection and the results of early life fears and trauma, and how they play out in our personality as it develops over the years. And we call the products of these, like addiction, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, all these things we've discussed, ADD, OCD, these are the children of fear. They are all essentially reactions to the fears inside of us from which we try to redirect our minds by the use of these things that become our symptoms. But we haven't really come to the part where we're able to say, well, what about after I take my fifth gate? Am I well? No, you're not well. Do I feel well? You're probably feeling great. But in order to keep that feeling and in order to continue our spiritual progress, there's something else important we must understand. And that is the role of our reality rules and our spiritual principles. Before I even discuss the reality rules and the spiritual principles, I think it's important to understand what role they play. Well, we went through our fourth and fifth gate. We got rid of a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the underlying trauma from our misdirection and usually childhood fears. But how do we keep it? And how do we keep improving it? And what are we supposed to do next if we want to really be wonderfully happy, productive, perhaps even very spiritual people, free of all this? In order to do that, we must use the reality rules and remind ourselves of them and the spiritual principles. I remember in the early days I was developing this program, I remember having people, my patients, constantly repeat back to me the reality rules and the spiritual principles they were employing in their lives and how it was helping them sweep the decks clean. You know, life keeps sending in these incoming missiles, things to make us afraid, things to challenge us, things to send us negative messages. Or maybe just basically reminders of a past that we no longer wish to be a part of, but to move on. Well, if you're someone who has perhaps read the Bible, you'll remember that in there are a whole lot of rules about how we're supposed to live. The reality rules and the spiritual principles perform precisely that same function. We remind ourselves, I cannot change the past. I can't know the future. Any fear I have has to be put in the perspective of, if I can't do something, well, then it can't possibly be my job. I have to either do something to change the circumstances or accept the circumstances, work with them, and keep my emotional state, my moral, ethical, and spiritual plate constantly getting re-cleansed by reminding myself about what are the principles of the program that have been proven to help people get even more well, and most of all, to stay well after they've taken their fifth gate. You'll find a list of the reality rules and the spiritual principles in both of my books. I recommend Five Gates, The Science of Healing the Spirit. They're most developed there and they're most complete there. And there are a lot of things about who are we and how do we re-cleanse ourselves to put ourselves in the proper perspective. The idea is that we'll just rely upon, keep our fears out of our hair by giving our trust, and eventually, as we see they work, giving our faith to the reality rules and the spiritual principles. You may ask, well, do these take the place of the Bible? Well, if you like the Bible and you can live by those rules, you'll come out with pretty much the same collection. But I tried to simplify them, make them clearer, and put them in one